Hi, welcome back. I hope you're all well. I'm going to be talking about relationships today, of all things. And this is something that's been on my mind for quite a while. I've obviously worked around lots of men in the past, and we've had plenty of time to talk on this subject. In fact, sometimes it was the only subject that these guys were discussing. And that is what they are looking for in a woman, in a prospective partner. And it's also something that a lot of girlfriends of mine have asked me, what are guys looking for? I find it confusing. And that's not too dissimilar to what guys say is, what are women looking for? We find that confusing. And I've actually found that there's a lot of overlap between the two. So I'll go through what things I've heard men are looking for. I'll go through what I personally like in a partner, and then that kind of will lead us into a little bit of a bigger and deeper discussion. So the funny thing is that people are looking for all kinds of things, and I don't mean that each separate person has like one separate thing they're looking for, but it will depend, on any given day. I've heard the same guy ask for things that even conflict when it comes to partnership. So I've commonly heard, I want a woman who's, a real good laugh. But then they're like, I also want a woman who's really serious in the bedroom. Then they'll say, I also want a woman who can cook and clean and look after me around the house. Then they'll say, actually, I want a woman that can look after herself because I don't like high maintenance women and I don't want to be having them needy on me all the time. And then flip that around again. They say, oh, I love it when a girl really, needs my attention and needs my help. That makes me feel like I'm doing something. So it's no wonder that women are confused, because all those things can be true from the same person. I've heard many guys, utter each of those things, even on the same night. They've come out with them. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Half an hour ago, you wanted this. Now you want this. It's common for guys to say, I want a partner to be really good in bed. And then they'll say, oh God, I don't want a partner that's had loads of sexual experience because that would put me off. And I'm like, well, how do you expect that partner to be getting good in bed? Are they just going to suddenly have learnt that overnight with no experience whatsoever? So we have to be realistic about these things. And I think there's always pressure on people to summarize, what they want in like a single sentence. And this is where things get confused. That are like, oh, I want a woman who's a kitchen type person, that's good around the kitchen, cooking and cleaning, this kind of, this housewife extraordinaire. And that's it, they leave it at that. But of course, that's not it. For most people, that's like one small part of someone's personality. And women might say, I want a guy that's, can do stuff in the kitchen as well. But that's not going to be all they want. Women commonly say, I want a guy who really makes me laugh. I've heard that loads of times from my girlfriends. They say, oh, I really love a guy that makes me laugh. But I guarantee that those same women wouldn't be impressed if they then went to bed, 3 dates later or whatever with this guy, and he started cracking jokes in bed and giggling in bed, and they want to kind of get down, and get some serious stuff going on. They're not going to appreciate him just being a joker. So they don't really want that to be the only element of his personality. And this is where I think there's overlap, that actually in life, we change our personalities based on context. And what I'm looking for is someone who is able to do that and recognize that within themselves. If I look back at my life, there's been stages in my life where I've almost been completely different people. When I worked in security, most of the time I was quite a dominant, militant, tough, kind of stoic guy, because that was what the context of the situation demanded of me at the time. I had to become that in order to thrive in that lifestyle that I was leading. Once I'd left that lifestyle and I'd moved into a different job, and the demands weren't upon me to act like that anymore, I slowly became a slightly different type of person. Now I could always go back to that, but why would you be like that if you're working in an office environment? So I changed again, and if I look back at stages in my life with different jobs, different relationships, different friendship groups, I've become these different types of personalities. and I can morph back into those when necessary. So I'm pretty laid back guy these days. I'm pretty chilled, and I'm kind of, I guess, a lot more sensitive than I used to be, a lot more interested in my own emotions, a lot more in touch with that kind of thing, a lot of introspection and looking back in life and stuff. But if you suddenly stuck me in a place where there was like violent intention, I change very quickly into that old character, that person that was like this tough, stoic guy that was, even my eyes kind of glaze over slightly. And I've had girlfriends say that, they said, oh, when that guy was kind of being troublesome, I saw a change in you, and they said they liked that. They liked to see that change. It kind of got them a bit excited. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, is that we need to understand that we're not just this one-dimensional person, because we often set ourselves up like that. Not only do we set up that idea for a partner that, oh, I'm looking for only this type of partner, but we also set ourselves up like that when we think of ourselves in this like one-dimensional way of like, oh, I'm a funny guy, and that's it. No, you can be loads of different guys. You can be a funny guy and a serious guy and a bit of a scary guy, right? You can be all those things combined and be quite a normal person to boot. That doesn't mean you've got like a split personality. So in a partner, I want someone that is aware of that and can do many of those tasks proficiently. I like to be with a woman that can be sensitive and caring and look after me. Sometimes I get sick. I need someone to help me in those times and look after me. Sometimes I might be sad, something bad happens in life. I don't want a partner that's just going to kind of sit there stoically and stare at the wall. I want comfort in those times. Equally, there'll be times where I do want a partner that can be tough. If we're going through something, I want someone that's able to be resilient, that, let's say something happened to me, I had an accident, my partner would then need to be kind of tough and resilient to be able to deal with everything that life was thrown at them at the time. I want them to be able to cope, right? And I want to be with someone that I can have some fun with. So even though they've got to be this tough person in that situation, I don't want them to be like that all the time, because that would be horrible, right? You'd be stuck with this like militant, tough person sat there. So I want them to be fun to be around, that they've got to have enough confidence to be able to have a laugh with me, have a joke with me. And I think, having listened to all these guys talking, that's what these guys really want. They don't want this like one-dimensional, like the red pill guys are saying, oh, I only want a woman that's like, she knows her place, she stays in the kitchen and she kind of does what she's told. They don't really want that. These guys are mostly incels that say this nonsense. They've just been disappointed by women because they weren't invited to the prom or whatever. So they've developed this like one-dimensional, derogatory, hateful kind of attitude. But if you're really serious about spending the rest of your life with someone, you want someone that's multi-dimensional and competent and capable. And I think self-confidence plays a massive part in that. That if you have self-confidence and you can be introspective and explore those different sides to your personality, then that allows you to be a really good partner to someone. And that's the kind of people that I would look to have a relationship with. And I think for women, it's very much the same. The girls that I've spoken to want these kind of multifaceted guys, like I mentioned. Girls like it when a guy's tough, right? If a girl is walking down the street with her man and another guy like comes up and tries to grab her or says some really unpleasant stuff, I don't know many girls that just want her man to like cower in fear and not defend her. Even though a lot of girls might say, I don't want my guy having a fight, but really what they want you to do is stand up for them, right? They want you to kind of say to the guy, hey, leave my missus alone, and ultimately to kind of dominate that guy and chase him off. That's what most of the girls I've met want. At the same time, this dominant character that they are looking for, they don't want you to get home and then kind of start shouting at them and say, right, you go and make me a sandwich and be dominant in that way. They want you then to be kind, caring, maybe romantic. That could change in the bedroom, right? They might want you to revert to that dominant character again, because a lot of girls like a more dominant male in the bedroom. Not all, but certainly some. The girls that I've met in the past have wanted me to revert to that kind of character in that situation, in that context. So I don't think this is an easy answer. That's what everyone looks for, this one sentence answer of like, all guys want this in a girl. And I think if I had to summarize it in one sentence, it would be confidence. That if you can find someone with confidence, that means they can explore all those aspects of their personality, and they can offer you the best, most well-rounded version of themselves. And I've met loads and loads of people that have the ability to be all these fantastic things, you know, that they can be competent in all these different areas, but they never actually explore any of those areas because they just don't have the self-confidence to get out there and open themselves to that kind of thing. You know, when I mentioned about you become these different people in different contexts, you have to put yourself into those situations to find those parts of your character. You know, I found the strong, dominant, militaristic side of myself by putting myself in violent and uncomfortable situations. I found the caring part of myself by putting myself in situations where I could empathize with someone where I was experiencing loss, you know, and heartbreak. So all those things are vital. That's why as we grow up, it's very important to go through some of these stages. You know, when you break up with someone as a teenager and it feels like your world's ending, that's actually teaching you a new dimension, a new aspect to your character that you didn't have before, right? And you kind of collect all these along the way and you build them up. I really feel that people don't get a grasp of this until they're maybe, you know, 30 to 40 years old. It all starts to click into place. Before that, I always just felt like I was one type of person, and I thought, who was that guy, you know, I was before? Forget him, he was an idiot, I'm now this, you know, this is the new me. And you just latch onto these things and you never really get the idea that you can be any of those things, you know, and it doesn't change you. You're still you, but you have all these dimensions to yourself, and that can make you a very powerful person, not just in terms of desirable in a relationship. It can make you a very powerful person in the workplace because it means you're very diverse. You can put your skills into many different things. You know, a good manager, a good leader of people should be able to empathize, should be able to help people and make them feel secure, but should also be able to wield respect, you know, and maybe a tiny touch of fear. Like, you don't want to disappoint your manager. You don't want to get your manager upset with you because he might have a go at you. And equally, you really like the guy, he can be a lot of fun. You know, if you have a manager like that that's got all those diverse aspects to his personality, you're really going to work well for them, instead of just someone who's always an arsehole and you're kind of scared of him, but you know, you never have any fun at all. You don't respect that person. And the same as, you know, I've worked for people that are just 100% having a laugh, and then when it comes to actually having any discipline around the place, is lost. So that's what I believe most men are looking for. And I'm sorry I can't give you a really simplistic answer. I think it's an interesting thing to think about, and how we can explore ourselves and our own personalities, explore those different areas. Let me know what you think. I would be fascinated to hear. If you're a guy and you've got a different opinion to that, maybe you do just want a girl that's one-dimensional, that she only is this, put that down in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've met someone who fits the criteria that I'm talking about, and you know, that rings some truth with you, then leave a comment as well. But I would especially love to hear it from girls too, if this rings true to them, because I believe it does. I believe that all this idea that men and women are completely different in what they're looking for, I don't think, if you actually boil it down to the real personality traits, I think we're all looking for the same thing. I think we're looking for these multi-dimensional people that are confident enough to be all these different things, you know, in different contexts in life. So we're not that much different at all. If that rings true to you and you're a girl and you think, yeah, that's what I'm looking for, is these different things, then let me know. If not, maybe you're a girl that just thinks, right, I only want a guy that's like a dominant, stoic, tough guy. That'd be kind of tough in some parts of your life. But if that's the truth for you, then leave a comment. I'd be fascinated to know about it. Thanks a lot for watching. Sorry it's only a short one and it's kind of a bit off my normal topic, but it's just a subject that I'm fascinated by. I hope you guys are as well. Good to talk to you. I'll see you all next time. Take care.